Welcome back everyone. As promised, in this video we're going to create particle effects to make our game look and feel a bit more interesting. To create a particle effect, simply head over to Create, Effects, Particle System, and you'll normally see a bunch of white particles spawning in the scene. I'm going to call this particle system Explosion, and we'll be spawning this effect in-game whenever an enemy hazard destroys itself. So you'll notice a bunch of settings in the inspector. All of these are related to the particle system and can be used to change its visuals, size, amount of particles, and lots more. It may look a bit overwhelming, but don't worry, a lot of these settings are self-explanatory. For example, here we have the shape module. Left-clicking on this will open up a menu, and you'll see that we can use these settings to change the shape and radius of this particle effect. So currently it's a cone shape, but we can change this into a circle or an edge, for example, and you'll see that the particles spawn in-game in a different way. I'll choose for my particle system a circular shape. Now I'll change the look of each individual particle by heading over to the render module down here. So currently we have the soft circular particles, but let's say I wanted my particles to take on the look of a certain sprite. I can do so by changing the material here to the sprite's default material. And now I can head up here to the texture sheet animation module, make sure to enable it by left clicking on this circle and changing the mode from grid to sprites. This way I can left click here and choose whatever sprite I have in my project to act as the visuals of each individual particle. For example, I can choose my player's head, and now the particle system spawns that head sprite. Obviously I don't want this though. I've actually gone ahead and made in Photoshop a few white shapes I can choose from for my particle systems, and I encourage you to do the same. I'll export these into my Unity project and then, as usual, set the sprite modes from single to multiple, so I can slice them up inside of the sprite editor. And now I'll select my particle system again and choose for sprite one of these new ones. I think I'll just stick with the basic circle shape. Now, the reason I made my particle sprites white is because now I can easily change their color up here. Usually, to add a bit more life and randomness to my effects, I left click on this small arrow icon and choose random between two colors. This way each particle will take on a random color between these two, which looks less boring. I'm going for a blue color to match up with these hazards. I can also change their size. Again, I'll click this little arrow to randomize that as well. And I'll also randomize their lifetime. In other words, how long does each particle stay in the scene before destroying itself? Currently, the particle just vanishes very abruptly. To fix that, we can head over to this size over lifetime module, toggle that on, and click on this size bar to be able to edit a curve. This axis acts as the size and this one the lifetime. So a curve like this one will have our particles start big and get smaller and smaller over time, having a scale of 0 once their lifetime is up, which will look nice and smooth. And note that you can double click on this curve to add points to it. So for example here, the particles will start big, turn very small, and then become big again before vanishing. So yeah, I really urge you to just experiment with all these settings. Again, most of these settings are self-explanatory, and if they aren't, just click around and see what happens. Worst case scenario, your particle system looks a complete mess, in which case you can simply head up here and reset the particle system components to start all over again. Anyway, to finish up this simple explosion effect, I'm going to turn off loop time and set duration to 0.1. This way the particle system will no longer spawn particles over and over again. This is an explosion after all. There should be a burst of particles and that's it. So I'll head down here to the emission module and click on this small plus icon. Now my particles will come out in a burst. To view your particle system, just hit the play button here. And of course you can state how many particles you would like per burst. I think it's a good idea to also randomize this value. Awesome, that looks great. I think I'll add one more thing, some noise. Just enable this module and then you can tweak this strength value to add some hectic, random movement to your particles, which looks pretty cool in my opinion. Once your explosion is complete, you can turn it into a prefab. This way we can easily spawn it in game via code. So I'll double click on my enemy script to open it up and create up here a public variable of type GameObject called explosion. And now I'll use the instantiate function down here to spawn the effect. So when the hazard collides with the player, I'll type instantiate and between the parentheses, I'll state what I want to spawn. So in this case, I want to spawn my explosion. Then for the second parameter, I'll state where I want to spawn my explosion. So simply at the enemy's position. And lastly, with what rotation. I'll just type quaternion.identity, which in other words means no rotation. Now I'll just copy that line of code and paste it here so that when the hazard collides with the ground, it also spawns the explosion. I can now save my script, head back into Unity, and select one of my hazard prefabs. Click open prefab and drag and drop my explosion prefab inside of that empty slot. And just repeat that process for the other two hazards. Hitting play, we can now enjoy our game with a few cool effects. However, you can click the pause button and you'll probably notice that the hierarchy is filled with particle systems, which spawn but don't destroy themselves, and this can hurt the game's performance. So the simple fix here is to head over to the explosion prefab, open it up, and set stop action to destroy. This way the particle system will auto-destroy itself once it has spawned all particles. And that's it. Well done for completing this video. I hope you enjoyed your first look at Unity's particle system, which believe me can be used to make incredible things. We'll really just scratch the surface here, but by experimenting on your own and watching more advanced tutorials, you'll be able to make amazing effects. For now though, why don't you try practicing on your own making a few more particle systems, and then get enemies spawning a random one. With that said, in the next video you'll be working on UI, so take a break and come back ready for that. Cheers!